Hi students, welcome to this video on punctuation rules. Punctuation refers to the set of marks that are used to regulate and clarify meaning and rhythm within a text. Punctuation helps to make the meaning of a text clear by linking or separating words, phrases, clauses, and sentences. So let's take a look at a couple of punctuations. There are approximately 14 punctuation marks. So the first is apostrophe, then we have brackets. There are three different kinds of brackets: square, parenthesis, and round. Slashes, forward slash and backslash that we'll discuss later. Bullet points, capital letters, and colons. Then commas, dashes, ellipses, exclamation mark, full stop or period, hyphen, quotation, question mark, then we have quotation mark, and semicolons. So these are all the punctuations, and we will go ahead with all the punctuation one by one. The first is the apostrophes. Now, apostrophes serve two purposes in writing: to shorten and link connected words in what is known as a contraction, to show possession or ownership of something. So apostrophe is used within a contraction. The purpose of an apostrophe is to indicate where a letter or letters have been removed from a contraction. If you take a look at the list here, did not changes to didn't. So what we have done is we have combined two words together, and it sounds better while talking as well. Do not is changed to don't, does not to doesn't, had not, hadn't, have not, haven't, he is, he's, he will, he'll, he would, he'd, he had, he'd, here is, here's, I am, I have, I've, should not, shouldn't, that is, that's, there is, there's, they are, there, they have, they've, was not, wasn't, we are, we're, we have, we've, we will, we'll, we would, we'd, were not, weren't, what is, what's. So let's take a look at the ownership now. Apostrophe is also used to show possession or ownership of something, to point out to the reader that this thing belongs to the subject being written about. Now here we have different examples. Garagmel was always searching for the Smurfs' hidden village. Have you seen Anna's school bag? As Linda turned and walked away, you could almost hear Jimmy's heart break into two. Moving on to the brackets. So beginning with the round brackets, depending upon the text type you are writing, brackets will serve different purposes. Let's take a look at some examples to make sense of this. So round brackets, which is also called parentheses, can be used in three different ways. Using the brackets to add extra information where required. For example, Neil Armstrong, the first person to walk on the moon, was introduced last. I got my first game console, a Super Nintendo, when I was 7. Try not to get into the habit of overusing brackets to add information as a replacement for high-quality engaged writing. For example, we could rewrite the example like, I'll never forget my 7th birthday as I unwrapped my first game console, a Super Nintendo, which was exactly what I wanted. Another is to organize a written text. So round brackets can be used with letters and numbers to organize lists. You can use either open or closed brackets as long as you're consistent. For example, items required, we have A, B, C, so we can use a half round bracket. Also, follow these steps, number 1, number 2, and number 3. Moving on to the square brackets. Square brackets are used to add information to the reader that was not explicitly stated. This is very similar to the round brackets in purpose. However, square brackets indicate this information was added by someone other than the original author. We typically use square brackets when we want to modify another person's words. They are most commonly found within articles and non-fiction texts where an editor has made amendments. So the first is to add clarification. For example, she, Mrs. Smith, did not find it amusing. To add information, the two teams in the finals of the first FIFA Football World Cup were both from South America, Uruguay, and Argentina. To add editorial comment or authorial comment, they will not be present, my emphasis. And the last one is we also use square brackets for nesting sometimes, like using square brackets like these inside the round brackets. Alright, moving on to the curly braces. Braces or curly brackets are most commonly used in technical writing and mathematics. It is also used in written text to branch items into subcategories or indicate that more than one word is being referred to. For example, select your pizza topping. So you can use here because there will be a lot of words which you're going to be using with comma, like pepper, onion, sausage, tomato, feta, anchovies, bacon, sun-dried tomatoes, chicken, broccoli. Types of shark, again you can use the curly brackets, whale, bull. Then range of numbers, again you can use the curly brackets. Moving on to the slashes, we'll start with the forward slash. Forward slashes serve many purposes in writing. They're commonly used to separate words, lines of poetry, abbreviations, dates, and fractions. Forward slashes are also used to separate the words and or when they are used side by side in writing. For example, when we visit the Ganges River next summer, I hope to go hiking. And hiking. The forward slash can also be used in text as a substitute for the phrase and or. Be sure to take an extra blanket or comforter when you go on an overnight boating adventure. A forward slash is going to indicate a relationship between two things. In order to make a successful landing on the moon, we are going to take the Mars or Venus route into space. For the abbreviations as well, care of C/O, look out for the package we sent you, care of Shane Smith, or the house was unbearably hot as the air conditioning was broken. They are also used to separate the dates like 12/11/2005 and for the ratios as well, fractions in numeric form 1/4, 3/5. Moving on to the backslash and vertical slash. So backslash can perform numerous functions in computer code varying in meaning based on the programming language, and to represent structure on a database or within a folder structure like C:\\, backslashes, root folders, backslash subfolder. So like you also see the website link. That's also an example of a backslash. Next is in computer programming, a vertical slash is like a straight line. is an OR operator. When a developer writes a line of code, the symbol indicates that the software should do one thing or the other. So in C++ language, for example, the code x equal a vertical slashes x equal b is telling the program to determine if x is equal to either a or b. So we hardly use vertical slash unless you're a mathematician. All right. So moving on to the bullet points. Bullet points are also frequently referred to as dot points, and they are used to create lists. For example, there is a list that you have prepared: milk, bread, cheese, tomato, butter, that this is what you're going to be, buying from the grocery today, and you don't miss out on any of the point. Next is when you keep your style consistent. So make sure the grammatical structure of your bullet points is parallel by starting each with the same part of the speech. For instance, if you start one point with an adjective, start them with all and adjectives. So adopting a dog will make you popular with dog lovers and famous for having the most adorable pet on your block. So try and start with an adjective if that's what you're starting with the first bullet point. Capital letters, it's quite easy. Capital letters serve a number of purposes and are a foundational skill of punctuation and writing in general. They used to begin a sentence. For example, the rug was dark blue. I asked Sam to repeat the question. The Siberian tiger is an endangered animal. They're used to identify proper nouns as well, like we can see in the second example. Moving on to the colons. Colon is used to inform the reader that there is more detail to follow, which is already written, and introduces a list. It separates two clauses and explains the first. The colon is never preceded by a white space. It is always followed by a single white space in normal use and is never followed by a hyphen or a dash. A colon is not normally followed by a capital letter in British usage, though American usage often prefers to use a capital. Now take a look at the first point, which is gives more details. So here you can see you will need the following items. Now what are the items? You're starting with a colon: chalk, paper, scissors. Second, explains what a clear situation is. So he's sure of one thing, colon. Now what is he sure of? He'll be attending the concert. Third, explicates the golden rule. Numerous friends have provided me with inspiration. Now who are those friends? You are using a comma to separate and starting with a colon. Sarah, Jim, Cindy. Explains what the problem is. Africa is facing a terrifying issue. What's the issue? Perpetual drought. Starting with a colon. Let's take a look at some common colon mistakes. So the first one is using a colon between a verb and its object or complement. Like you see, the very best peaches are, and I'm using a colon which is not supposed to be used. So simply remove it. We should not be using any colon after are and those between that. Second is when you use a colon between a preposition and its object. For example, my favorite cake is made of. Again, it's after the preposition. Of is a preposition, so don't use a colon like that. And the third is using a colon after such as, including, especially, and similar phrases. So this violates the rule that the material preceding the colon must be a complete thought. For example, there are many different types of paper, including. Again, I'm using a colon and then I'm saying college ruled, wide ruled. So you can see that there are many different types of paper, including is not a complete sentence. And that's why you should not be using a colon. So please kindly remove it. Now moving on to the semicolons. Semicolons break sentences apart for a more dramatic pause than a comma. The difference between the two is that a comma separates ideas, whereas a semicolon connects ideas. The use of the semicolon suggests that the writer sees the two smaller sentences as being more closely related than the average two consecutive sentences. So there are a couple of examples here to begin with. This assignment is extra credit only. And I'm using a semicolon and then I'm using a connector, which is however, we still need to submit it. Betty completed her task well in time. Semicolon, John did not yet finish his. So these are the two complete sentences, like two independent clauses, and I'm joining them with a semicolon. The third, Jamie drives well. Moreover, he is friendly too. Again, it is a connector, moreover. That's why I'm using a semicolon. Then, although it is a conjunction, although she reached late to office, yet she managed to attend the meeting. So although with a yet combination, whenever I should always use a semicolon. Some classes require students to write essays, research papers, or projects, yet others focus more on group projects. Okay, let's move on to comma. Commas are used to separate words and force the reader to pause. They are used to separate lists, phrases, and clauses in sentences. So the first one is use comma to separate independent clauses when they are joined by any of these 7 coordinating conjunctions, which we already discussed in the conjunction video. Fanboys. So here, and, but, for, or, nor, so, yet. Whenever you use it, always use a comma before the conjunction, like the game was over, comma, but the crowd refused to leave. Yesterday was her brother's birthday, comma, so she took him out to dinner. Second, use commas after introductory clauses, phrases, or words that come before the main clause. Common starter words for introductory clauses that should be followed by a comma include after, although, as, because, if, since, when, while. For example, when the snow stops falling, comma, we'll shovel the driveway. While I was eating, comma, the cat scratched at the door. However, you may not be satisfied with the results. Then is using a pair of commas in the middle of a sentence to set off clauses, phrases, and words that are not essential to the meaning of the sentence. Use one comma before to indicate the beginning of the pause and one at the end to indicate the end of the pause. Now here we can take a look at clause, phrase, and word. So clause, that Tuesday, comma, which happens to be my birthday. So I'm explaining more about the subject, what happened on the Tuesday, is the only day when I am available to meet. Now the phrase, this restaurant has an exciting atmosphere. The food, on the other hand, and also on the other hand is considered to be a connector. So I'm going to be using a comma before and after, is rather bland. Word, I appreciate your hard work. In this case, however, again, it's the word, but it's actually a connector. You seem to have overexerted yourself. Now, do not use commas to set off essential elements of the sentence, such as clauses beginning with that. That clauses after nouns are always essential, and following a verb expressing mental action always essential too. Now here we can see the book that I borrowed from you is excellent. He is dreaming that he can fly. Students who cheat only harm themselves. Now my niece wearing a yellow jumpsuit. So I'm talking more about the subject as I mentioned earlier. So these are examples of non-essential elements. Is playing in the living room. Then she was, however, too tired to make the trip. Also, well, we use commas a lot, so that's why there's a lot of pointers on that. Use commas to separate 3 or more words, phrases, and clauses written in a series. For example, the Constitution establishes the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. Then use commas to set off all geographical names, items and dates, addresses, and titles and names. For example, Birmingham, Alabama gets its name from Birmingham, England. Linda B. Lee, MD, that's her title, will be the principal speaker. Use a comma to shift between the main discourse and a quotation. For example, Harry said with excitement, "I'll see you tomorrow." In 1848, Marx wrote, "Workers of the world, unite." Now, what are the different abuses? Commas in the wrong places can break a sentence into illogical segments or confuse readers with unnecessary and unexpected pauses. First is, don't use a comma to separate the subject from the verb. For example, an 18-year-old in California is now considered an adult. Second, don't put a comma between the two verbs or verb phrases. For example, it will be incorrect to say, "We laid out our music and snacks and began to study," because we are already using "and," so we don't need to use a comma. Third, don't put a comma between the two nouns, noun phrases, or noun clauses in a compound subject. It will be incorrect to use a compound subject like "the music teacher from your high school and the football coach from mine are married." The last is, don't put a comma after the main clause when a dependent clause follows it. For example, "The cats crashed at the door while I was eating." The correct will be, "She is still quite upset, although she had won the Oscar." All right, so let's take a look at the dashes now. So dashes are used to emphasize a longer pause or break within a sentence, often for dramatic effect. So don't confuse the dash with the hyphen, because the dashes are quite longer. We use it in 5 different uses. The first is to show the ranges, example with times and dates, like World War II ran 1939 to 1945. Second is to divide the equal parts of a two-part adjective. For example, "The London, Austria flight is rescheduled." Third, to extend a sentence. It depends on one thing, which is trust. It depends on trust. It always has. It needed trust. Now here, when we take a look at the first pointer, it depends on one thing, which is trust. In this example, the dash has been used like a colon. The second, the dash has been used like a semicolon when we talk about it depends on trust. And the last is "it needed trust." Here the dash has been used like an ellipsis. The fourth is to mark a parenthesis. And here it depends, as my mother used to say, on trust. In this example, the dashes have been used, commas or parentheses. And the last is to credit a quotation. "Love is a serious mental disease," or "the way we spend our time defines who we are," said by Jonathan Estrin. All right, so let's take a look at the ellipses now, which are the 3 dots together, and the usage. The ellipse is constructed by creating 3 consecutive full stops. They serve 3 distinct purposes. Using ellipses to demonstrate where speech has been interrupted. For example, "Mom, I know you told me once," and there's an interruption in the speech, so that's when I used 3 dots. Using ellipses to demonstrate where parts of a quote have been removed. This is done to shorten up a statement and get to the point. So like, "Our team just didn't have what it takes to win tonight. We played with our heads down and barely communicated." And the last is to use as a dramatic effect. when demonstrating a statement which was incomplete. So here I can say, so where did you leave your phone or laptop? Asked the teacher. Or I just don't know. So because you don't know, there is an interruption. That's when we use ellipses. Next is the exclamation mark. The purpose of an exclamation mark is to demonstrate strong emotions within a sentence. They help the reader to determine if a word is to be spoken with emphasis, anger, or passion. They are commonly used after interjections, words or phrases that are used to exclaim, command, or protest, like wow or oh. So the first one is excitement. I can't wait to go to Disneyland. The second, surprise. Oh, you already bought a new car. Astonishment. Wow, London Bridge is even bigger than I thought. Emphasizing a point. No, we don't want to go to the party. Strong emotion. That news story made me so angry. All right, we're almost coming to the end, but we still have some few left. So let's see here. Full stops, we know it's quite a common fact. The purpose of a full stop, also known as a period in the United States, is to end a sentence, to remind the reader to take a pause as the sequence of the text is complete. Now, the first one is we generally use full stop with the declarative sentences like, I like fruits, her favorite color is red. Second is used for titles after, in fact, so Mr. Smith. So I'm going to use dot after Mr. was a generous man. Dr. Samuels believed in honesty. Then I'll use it with the decimal points. He won $1.5 million in lottery, or sales soared to 12.6% than before. And we generally use with the abbreviations as well, like etc. etc. dot I.e, which means that is, or E.g, which is example. All right, moving on to hyphens. Hyphen, not to be confused with a longer dash, is used to link words or break words into smaller parts. For example, to link connected words, to link words at the end of the line, or using hyphens to explain the pronunciation. So I've just penned down a couple of words here which we generally use with the hyphens, like 37th, 5-year-old, ice cream cone, off campus, state of the art, 2:20 p.m. to 5:10 p.m. Fundamental, because if I'm kind of cutting the syllables, 2 to 400 people, 1980 to 2000, co-worker, sugar-free, well-designed. Moving on to the question marks. Question marks remind the audience that a question is being asked as opposed to a statement being made. Question marks are only placed at the end of the sentence. It nearly always consists of a pronoun, a helping verb, and sometimes the word not. Now, firstly, it is used with the direct questions. Question mark is used at the end of a direct question. Indirect questions takes a period. For example, what are you doing tonight? Or what is your name? Second, it's used with the direct questions within a sentence. So would they make it on time, she wondered? Or what are we having for dinner? His son asked. Next is it's used as a part of a title of the work. When the question mark is part of the title of the work that is set in italics, as it is in the cited novel, the question mark is italicized. For example, have you read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the Philip Dick novel that inspired the movie Blade Runner? It's also used for the requests. Requests that are phrased as questions should end with a period. These are really requests or commands and not true questions. Would you please send the report to the concerned person? All right, moving on to the quotation marks. Quotation marks, also known as the speech marks, demonstrate to the reader words or phrases that are spoken or quoted. The use of the quotation marks, also called inverted commas, is very slightly complicated by the fact that there are two types, single quotes and double quotes. As a general rule, British usage has in the past usually preferred single quotes for ordinary use, but double quotes are now increasingly common. Quotation marks are for when you want to use someone else's words in your writing. It's used only with the direct quotes. For example, according to Thomas Edison, genius is 1% inspiration and 90% perspiration. No matter what you say, I have to go back for them, I explained to my commander. I'll take the big one, thanks, as I'm really hungry, I told the waiter. Alright, the next fact is if you're quoting a complete sentence, you should start the quote with a capital letter. For example, my boss reminded me that this was a no-brainer and that I shouldn't hesitate any longer. So here, do commas and periods go inside or outside quotation marks? That's a very important question, and the answer is simple. It's inside the quotation marks. So please always remember that fact. Then it's also used for the title of the books, magazines, poems, articles. Titles of books, albums, magazines, newspapers, other standalone and bigger bodies of work are usually italicized. Poems, chapters, articles, smaller bodies of work which form a larger work are emphasized by using the quotation marks. Now, single quotes means quotes within quotes. So we've already mentioned that single quotation marks can be used for quotes within the quotes, but that's not all that they can do. They can also be used instead parentheses for translations, but in that case, they don't have to be separated by commas. For instance, she told him bonjour, good day, when they met. So good day, I want to emphasize this particular word. That's why I'm using a single quote. This article was written by a professional writer. Well, I forgot to use it. It has to be a single quote here. So highly specialized terms in certain fields can also be written with the single quotation marks. So thank you for watching the video. Keep watching more English grammar videos and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.